was a bright and beautiful day in Athens, Tennessee, as I walked on the grounds where Connestoga and Nocatula, aka Weena, were buried. I had an overwhelming feeling as if I was being watched. This is the actual burial site of the two lovers. Their bodies are literally under my feet. Welcome to the 5th episode of This Happened Here. Today's story comes to you from Coach Farmer Drive, east of North Jackson, Athens, Tennessee, and from the graveside of Connestoga and Weena. On this channel, I bring you true, interesting, and sometimes strange stories I find here in the US and anywhere else in the world. But today's story is one of the most precious love stories I have ever heard. There was no need for me to create a story like I do the others because this story was already documented in the Wesleyan College Archive, so I will share it as how I read it, but with some embellishment, of course. Now here is the story. I am your host, L.T. Bartek. Athens was a father and the leader of the Cherokee tribe in Tennessee from 1761 to 1775. One day, while he was sitting in his wigwam, members of his tribe brought in a wounded young English soldier. They had found him while on one of their hunting trips. They were not sure how he had gotten there. He could have wandered away from camp while being delirious, or was just left there to die. He had a deep wound on the side of his head, so deep it was exposing his skull. He was not well enough to move, so they had to set up camp and stayed for a few days to tend to him long enough so he would be stable enough to take back home. So on that day when they brought him to Athens, he immediately sent for his daughter Weena to take care of him, because he was still in very bad shape. Having to take care of this soldier for days, feeding him and taking care of his every need, they grew close and soon fell deeply in love. It was not long after that the soldier went to Athens and asked to be part of the tribe. Weena helped to translate because even though they had taught each other their languages while she was taking care of him, he still needed help. Athens had admired the young soldier for his bravery and strength to overcome his illness. He was also a great fisherman, even though his hunting skills were not on par. Nonetheless, he learned fast and soon he was hunting successfully with the tribe. He was also a pleasant man, and it was said he had great physical beauty. He was tall, broad-shouldered, had an abundance of light curly hair and deep blue eyes, and he also had a manly voice. So Athens was pleased to welcome him to his tribe, and soon a ceremony was held. He was adopted by the tribe and given the name Connestoga. Because of his love for Weena and not wanting to leave her, he vowed to give up his vast inheritance back home and asked for Weena's hand in marriage. The ceremony was performed and the two became one. Their love grew and blossomed. It shone so brightly it rivaled the sun. Then one morning in late autumn, when Athens and his tribe were on a hunting trip to procure the winter's supply of meat, something dreadful happened. They were divided into groups, and in Athens group were his daughter Weena and Connestoga. They would hunt in the day and then return to their camps at night. They would camp for weeks on these trips, and on this particular trip they were having great success. On that fateful morning, Connestoga got up early and went out to catch a deer they had been tracking. He was crouched behind the bushes waiting for the deer. Then suddenly a young Indian warrior by the name of Mocking Crow sprang forward from behind him and plunged the knife up to the hilt into his neck. It took him by surprise, so he could not defend himself. He sprang to his feet and saw the Indian fleeing. He raised his rifle and fired a shot, killing Mocking Crow. The others heard the shot and the shriek of the Indian and rushed over. By that time, Connestoga was laying on the ground, bleeding from his neck. In his weakening voice, he asked them to get Weena so he could see her for one last time before he died. She ran over and was kneeling by his side in no time, rubbing his fast, chilling hand and kissing him. In his dying voice, he looked into Weena's eyes and said, "Weena, my love, how can I leave you? God keep—" But his voice faded as his eyes closed in death. Weena was so distraught, she screamed over and over again and ripped her hair from her head. She tore at her clothes as if she too was suffocating. Then she pulled his lifeless body to her and hugged him. She begged him to come back to her. She urged him to speak to her. When he remained lifeless, she suddenly stopped and looked up. She had a wild look in her eye. She pulled the knife out of her beloved's neck and shouted, "I cannot! I will not live without him!" And she plunged the knife deep into her breast. She fell hard on him, and the sudden impact to his chest brought him back to life, and he opened his eyes. He looked at Weena, slumped across him, their blood mingling together, and her face pressed up against his, and a smile appeared on his lips. He slowly raised his stiffened right arm and placed it across her shoulder. He convulsed then. More blood gushed from his lips. Both their bodies shook. Then he closed his eyes in death, and their spirits departed as one. Athens came just as their spirit departed, and he in shock stopped moving and just stood planted where he was, looking at his beloved daughter and her husband laying on the ground dead. Tears flowed down his cheek and pain ripped apart his insides. After a while, some of the braves moved as if to take the bodies away, but Athens raised his hand and stopped them. He told them not to move the bodies, but only to cover them with the fallen autumn leaves. So the children gathered the beautiful multicolored leaves of autumn and covered the bodies, creating a mound on top of them. Athens then gathered the elders, and soon they performed the tribal ceremony for the dead couple, after which they covered the couple with earth and stones where they lay, but not before placing seeds in each of their hands. An acorn was placed in Connestoga's hand, because that was the meaning of his name, and a hackberry was placed in Weena's hand. The next year, during spring, they went to see if the seeds were growing, and they saw that they were indeed. The trees grew, entwining their limbs and branches with each other, and they lived for 150 years. The hackberry was the first to die, and not wanting to live without its partner, the acorn tree died 5 years later. Now on the spot stands 2 statues created by Mariah Barber and donated by Aileen Chambers, class of 1965, to mark the place where the lovers died and to tell us of the true and undying love of Connestoga and Weena, aka Nocatula. Okay, so if you're still here, thank you so much for making it this far, and I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please hug and kiss the thumbs up icon, subscribe, share this video, and click the bell icon so that you can stay in the loop for the rest of this series. Remember, I will upload an episode once every week. So stay tuned, and I look forward to having you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.